Welcome to the River Downstream, our podcast. This week, you're getting a bonus episode in preparation for the February 25th service to get caught up with where our partnership in Zambia was at last year and the projects they were working on. This is the podcast version of that live-streamed service. You can go back one episode to our HSR panel discussion for this week's announcements. Now over to our Zambia team.
So today, we're just going to be giving a presentation about kind of the history, what's the partnership like, what did we actually do on the ground, what did that look like, and then kind of some outcomes, some sharing of that, and a bit of a recap at the end, and that's going to kind of cover the next 30 minutes or so, I think. So this is a church that shows it's 1940 it was established. It was established by some white people that went there. But I'd like you to know that Madzamoyo, I got to tell you first that I constantly mispronounce that name. Madzamoyo. That's the way to say it. Can you all say it with me? Madzamoyo. Madzamoyo. All right, thank you. So if I say it wrong, again...
I'll tell them, don't worry.
Okay. Okay, you don't have to. She will. So Madzamoyo, it was established long before any colonialists ever showed up. And it's been there forever and a day, and it's a beautiful place, and I'm sure you'll see just how beautiful it is with the videos and the pictures. But we were welcomed by a men's choir at one point, and we have an audio file of that. So if you want, you can close your eyes and listen to this recording of the men singing about Madzamoyo. Those are them welcoming us to Madzamoyo and celebrating Madzamoyo. And then we entered into the scene, and maybe Melissa can give us a bit of a history and overview of our engagement.
Sure. And just to note, in the song, Madzamoyo, they were singing about it to welcome us, but also Madzamoyo itself is two words, which means water and living, like your life force. So that's what Madzamoyo means. So you do hear it quite a bit in a lot of her because it is about the spirit living inside you. So the overview of the partnership could take more than half an hour, so I will be very succinct in what I share. In 2007, we sent a scouting group over to Zambia to see if it was somewhere that we wanted to partner with. And we had a few reasons for choosing Zambia. One of them is that Central America is saturated with churches who want to do development and mission work for us to get to, but there's also overrepresentation of church groups there. If you start moving farther out to Zambia or places like that, there's very, very few partners. So we liked the opportunity that presented for a long-term partnership. We also really liked that because there's like 74 different tribal languages spoken in Zambia. Their official language is English. So it made it very easy for us to try to establish a partnership there. So we went in 2007 to investigate to see if it was somewhere that we could see a partnership working. And then in 2008, a huge team went. There was 10 of us that traveled to Madzamoyo to establish how the partnership was going to work and to see the work that was already being done on the ground that we were going to come alongside them with. We have been through many ups and downs with the partnership. We have been the longest standing member representation of the partnership because there have been so many staff changes on the ground in Zambia. We were listing them while we were there. It's probably over 10 for World Renew. It's at least that many for RCZ. So we have been the constant in the partnership, which affords us a lot of flexibility in how the partnership works because the organizations trust us because we've been coming for so long and we've kept our word for so long that there's really a strong relationship that's been established because of that. But at one of the low points in the partnership with staffing and the way things were going in 2015, a team of 4 of us went over and we sort of dismantled it. It was a terrible trip. We had to go and rip apart everything that had been going on and redesign how that was going to go. And we did that trip start to finish in 8 days. Yeah, so we were on the ground for like 4 days. 2 days flying on each end, 4 days there, tear apart the partnership and come home. It was terrible. But by the time we got back in early 2017, things were changing and they were looking hopeful. And we were seeing very, very positive changes, and we had a good team being built on the ground. And I can report today that thankfully the last 2 years we haven't been able to travel. We haven't, we've had Zoom communication, but no in-person communication. But this was the most hopeful trip that we have ever had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. Mm-hmm. Thanks for that overview. Mm-hmm. So the partnership consists of 3 partners. One is World Renew, which is the arm of the Christian Reformed Church, and their interactions with international issues of development and international relief, which is what Pam and Henry Knoppers are engaged with right now. So that's World Renew. Previously, they were known as CRWRC, Christian Reformed World Relief Committee. So if you have some history with the CRC, that's who they were before. We're then also joined with the Reformed Church in Zambia. And so that whole denomination there, of which, what did Reverend Zulu say? How many churches was he looking after, and how many people? It was
thousands of churches and hundreds of thousands of people, yeah.
The number 1,300 comes to mind, but 13 was a number that came up a lot in our trips, in some extensions or whatever. So a lot of churches there. And then, of course, the river. Here we're as the river. So we'd like to introduce some of the people in this partnership. And the first one is Reverend Dr. William Zulu. He is the General Secretary of the Reformed Church of Zambia. You could add a little bit more about this guy. You know him the longest, so...
This guy is amazing. I don't know how many of you have traveled to Africa, but pastors are so revered there. They're put on a pedestal. They're like barely short of Jesus. And this man is the most humble man that you will ever meet. We have seen him stop on the side of the road and lift old ladies into the back of his truck to make sure they have a ride. We have seen him get down on his knees to greet people who can't stand to greet him. It is an unbelievable thing to witness in that culture. He has a beautiful soul. And the reason that things have been so hopeful and growing so well is because he is the head guy of the entire church in Zambia, and he is pushing this program that we've helped to design. He is the one, he's got the program in the seminaries now, so every pastor that's being trained, a program that we helped push out 6 years ago. It's incredible. He's pretty wonderful.
Just a great guy to be around. He's always laughing.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. Next is Oliver Wakeland. He's a country director with World Renew Zambia, and he's based in Lusaka, which is the capital city in Lusaka.
So any of you who knew Rory came to preach a couple times. This is who replaced Rory, because Rory is now working in Southeast Asia. So Oliver is our new Rory, and he started Lucky Guy in February of 2020. So This is the first time we got to meet him and go out and see the programs with him. Mm-hmm.
And then there is Lemon Chipwatali. He is our program advisor for World Renew, and he is based in Lilongwe. Lilongwe is in? Malawi.
Yeah.
And so he traveled over, Henry and Pat to Malawi, and then he came with them as well. Any further to say on Lemon?
Lemon seems to be providing really great leadership and oversight for our RCZ guys on the ground. He's been a really great addition to the team. Very knowledgeable, very introspective, I think. He pushes a lot of change from within the organization.
Mm-hmm. And just to repeat, RCZ means the Reformed Church in Zambia, so that in case we continue to use that acronym, just want to highlight that. Next is Benjamin Peary. He's the project coordinator, and he is based in Chipata. Chipata is a town that is located just above Madzamoyo, which is where we had most of our interactions, and he's based in Chipata.
Yeah, so Benjamin is doing most of the on-the-ground work and has been for about 4 or 5 years. So he's the one that's training all the facilitators in the programs that we will talk about shortly. He's the one that's been driving the most direct change, running the nutrition demos and that sort of thing. And he's a very quiet guy. He's very joyful, very strong in his faith. He's lovely to be around.
And it's obvious that the people know him and know him well. They interact with him well in the different villages that we were at. Pennius Peary, he's the newest to be added to that team. He's the agricultural officer.
So you should know that the last name Peary is like Smith or Jones. There's like 9,000 Pearys. If you want to guess what somebody's name is, you just guess Peary. You might be wrong, but most of the time you're right. So they are not related.
But they did call themselves brothers.
They did, yeah. And Pennius started in August, and he came alongside to help Benjamin, because Benjamin doesn't have training culture, so to speak. Like, he's got some on-the-ground training, but Pennius has a degree in agriculture, so he has been an amazing addition, and he is the most passionate person I have ever met there for his job. Like, he loves his job. He is so excited to be out in the villages. He's so excited to be working with the goats. Like, he's enthusiastic all the time. He's incredible. Yeah. And he also got stuck doing a lot of our translating, and he did it very happily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and apparently very well.
Yes, very well, because everybody who was testing him, I think, would nod and say, yeah, that's what they said.
Yeah. So next is Faith Chibonga. She's our World Renew Bridger, and she's based in Lilongwe, Malawi.
Yeah, so Faith is also new, and she was wonderful. Lovely. Anybody who's traveled before, we've had various bridgers. We had Doreen, we had Alphonsius, we had people whose names I can't remember because they were there for such a short time. Faith is really lovely, and she has a degree in tourism and the environment, and she's been so inspired by the work she's seeing at World Renew, going back to school.
And this was her first engaged as a bridger, and so Benjamin and Pennius kind of carried a little bit so that they could see how that interaction happened and worked, and so I think we were a pretty good training ground for her.
She didn't quit, and that's something.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about what happened 2015 with the Village Savings and Loans groups that were started. They were first introduced in 2015 by World Renew, and then it takes a little while for it to gather some steam, and so it didn't really hit the ground in Madzimoyo until about 2018. And if you saw the Facebook post that I put out, I showed this picture. I invited you to zoom in and you could look at it closely. But there are 5 stages to a village savings and loans group. And the first is to form a group. And so you have to decide together. There was a group that was a choir prior. They were the choir in their church. They decided to form a group. And then you have to pool money. Now, so this is different than microfinancing. This is not where we as a church or RCZ as a denomination gives them a pool of money. To start with, this is actually, they have to raise their own money to put into this pool of money. And so there were even some young boys that said they wanted to be part of the group, so they went out to work for money so that they could put it into the savings group and then engage. Once the money is then pooled, you can then either take out loans for communal or individual projects. And then there's a repayment of the loans that comes with interest out of the that happen, and there's an accounting for it, and all the proceeds are shared amongst everybody. But the beauty of this, I mean, this is really empowering for people to kind of take control of their money and not just think about today. Often we were told about if you give them some kwaches, which is their dollar. They're called kwaches. If you give them some kwaches, they'll just go out and spend it right away, and they're not really thinking about tomorrow. So the Village Savings and Loans really introduced this whole idea of thinking about the future. A hidden gem, I don't know if they knew this was going to happen or not, but as the groups then developed and growed, it is today. So there was a need for other training, and so then Benjamin and company would then come in with other training that we could then give to them according to where their needs were that day. Rather than trying to front load it, it was wait till the need arises, then provide them with training. And so we'll talk about a little bit more about that a little later on. But that was just really a gem, kind of a hidden but beautiful outcome of these teaching people about village savings and loans. Anyway, let's roll this next little video. So 2 things to note in there is one is the condition of the roads caused by rain and the excessive rain and the washing away and of the roads and so on. But also the other thing to note is how green it is there. And that's on account of the rain as well. And so we were there in what's called the emerald season. Emerald because it's green and it's lovely and it's lush. And you'll probably see more of that as well. So let's talk a little bit about what happens inside of these villages.
I just wanted to add on too, before I talk specifically about gender training, is that the VSLAs is the program that the river has sponsored through RCZ since 2015. And what we sponsor in that is the training and also the lockbox for the money and for each person who contributes, so that record keeping. And that program has been so powerful, as Dale said, that we've been able to use it in other training. And one of the trainings that they've been doing, there's savings groups already so far, and we don't have capacity actually to expand more than that. Requires training and oversight, right? So and there's people who want it, we can't provide it at this point in time. So it's been a very well-received program, and through that we get this other platform. So one of the things that they're doing right now is gender training, which is huge. And so when we were in the villages, we would hear gender training, and they said repeatedly, once we knew our roles, then we weren't fighting anymore. And I was like, okay, but who told you what your role? I was really worried about what the gender training was taught. If it was women do this work and men do this work, then I had some problems with it. So I got Benjamin, what is this training that we are giving on gender? And he said, no, it's basically teaching the husband and wife to communicate and decide together who's going to do what, who's going to be responsible for what, and then how the money's going to work so that there's harmony in the house. So it's not about assigning each gender a role, it's basically about teaching them how to communicate in their marriage. And the one village, well, all the villages said it was transformational for them, every single one. And then the one was really honest with us and said, at first there was mixed feelings. The men didn't like it because mostly, if you've been there, you see the women work sundown, and the men, I don't know, maybe do a little bit, and then they sit on the porch and drink beer. So it was very shocking, I think, for the men that they had to, step up and do these things. But now that they've done it, it's incredible because the men are saying it's changed everything so much. It's not so stressful. We're not fighting. We have money. It's amazing. And so we pictures because you can see this top village we went to when we got women are on one side, the men are on the other, right? But in the bottom, the men and women are intermingled, and that was the congregation that said there was mixed feelings, but now it's so much better. And they were sitting all together. So to be able to see that sort of change, really neat.
There was some hesitancy of some women to bring men into the group because they said that the men have confusion of mind. Good phrase to use amongst your own relationships at home. Are you suffering from confusion of mind right now? But we heard testimony from both sides, men and women, how wonderful that training has benefited them, how much, as you use the word harmony, how much it's really benefited the household. And then not just the men and the women, but the head man of the whole village also giving testimony to the impact that this gender role training has had on the whole village as a whole. So just
the one
tremendous.
man actually stood up and said, thank you for bringing a mixed team to show us that you care about inclusivity too. And I was shocked because we've never heard anything like that in the middle of these villages before. So the fact that we had equal representation of men and women on our team and they noticed, I think was important for us to consider for the future trips too.
Yeah, agreed. So one of the things that venture into, either as a group or on their own, but usually as a group, is what they called piggery. It's basically raising pigs or pig farm. We saw several pig farms because this was a big business for them. So this picture includes the proud pig farmer. As I began to take a picture of the pigs and the piglets, she just stepped right in. She photobombed it, if you will. But she was very proud. So we have a bit of a video to show you a little bit more of the pigs. All right, pigs and piglets.
So that's the Village Savings and Loans group taking their earnings together and investing in a business together. So instead of an individual business, they're also trying to raise more as well.
Notice that I didn't have a picture of me holding a pig.
That boar was having none of Dale trying to touch the piglets.
It's true. It's true.
So there's also a bunch of the groups have poultry businesses. We got to see two of them in Chitowo Village and Wangazi. And so basically they're same thing. They buy chicks and raise them and sell them for meat, and then they take the money, the profits, and they reinvest it back in chicks. So there's a little bit of a payout to each person in the group. We're always constantly reinvesting it to make sure there's still income coming in for each of them. And the board actually, like the local board that we're going to talk about, had a poultry business since about 2019. So they've had it for 4 years, and it just keeps going and funding the activities of the board.
Interesting is that there's two types of chicken in Zambia. There is broiler chicken, which is what you see on the picture here. These are broilers, but then there's also village chicken. And if you talk with a lot of locals, they would prefer the village chicken, which is the free-range roaming chicken. It's actually quite tough and sinewy, and so I would probably prefer the broiler. But so this is a kind of a new business for them. But these birds, these broilers, are then sold in the marketplace and to restaurants and the likes. Okay, next one.
Next one. We got to see one goat operation. So there's different groups are doing different things, and this the Chiembekezo Savings Group in Wangazi Village also is choosing to raise goats. We were there shortly after some of the goats were born, which was very sweet. Get to see them. They still had their umbilical cords attached. This one that Pennius is holding was like horrible. But there's still things that we can see that need change. The goats themselves are great, but the goat herder that took him, half an hour to find probably, was 7 years old. So he's spending all day out with the goats, keeping them out of trouble, and he's just this little tiny guy. You can go ahead and play the video.
Fun little goats. One of the other projects, of course, is farming, and the in Madzimoyo are groundnuts, which is the first on your left. Groundnuts. And
also known as peanuts.
Also known as... where do they grow? Do they grow off of the vine, or do they grow in the ground?
In the ground.
In the ground. That's why they call them ground nuts. How many of you knew that? How many of you did not know that peanuts grew in the ground? Thank you for your honesty. Phew. So the next in the lineup is sunflower, and then the third one is soybeans, and the last one is maize. And here we are actually looking at, with Pennius, at a piece of ground that's really rocky. And because that's the kind of conditions of some soil in a lot of the villages, it's very rocky. And so he is teaching them how to deal with that in rocky ground. And he's planted the plants really close together so that they take root, stabilize the soil, and then he starts to thin them out. So that way it gives them all a better chance of growth. So this was a bit of a demo plot where we took these pictures. And just a lot of thought is being put into, okay, so you're going to be a farmer. What does that look like? What help do you need? And kind of go from there.
So one of the programs that we have a platform to run through the VSLA program is conservation agriculture, which is so important because we're working with farmers who are subsistence farmers, right? So if they're just in this district, but they're introducing different concepts like typically, I mean, if you look at the tomatoes, you can see how they're furrowed, and he's teaching them to not do that because then the water can't soak in and the plants aren't as nourished. So now they're changing even the way that they prepare the beds. They're using a ripper, so they're not digging up the entire field and losing all those nutrients. It's intrusive, which is pretty basic, and living. So they're going to plant underneath the maize. They'll plant things like pumpkin. So there's ground cover, but it's also producing another crop for them. He's opening up different markets for them, teaching them how to access different markets. So the tomatoes here that this VSLA group is choosing to do, tomatoes aren't in season right now. So the fact that they can grow them, and they have, there's smaller plants off to the left, you can see, so they're doing different plantings to make sure that they're maturing at different times so that they can sell the tomatoes at a premium because they're not typically grown right now, and they'll have a constant supply is the goal, so that this group will always be earning income off of their tomatoes. And I mean, there's a million tomatoes there right now, but in a couple of weeks there won't be, and then this will be the crop that can be sold. So they're changing things as much as they can. We also did meet with, which is on the next slide, this Good Nature Agro company, which is where they're getting seeds, and this is a social enterprise. Seed sharing, really impressive operation that we went to see. They even, because they said that some people are selling seeds pretending to be good nature, now that you can actually scan the tag on the bags and see what farmer grew the seeds, like right down to like the little pot and chipata. It was, what does it say on there? Mrs. Peary, of course, is Mrs. Peary, grew these seeds in this field, and they're also doing biochar with the husks that come off of the seeds that they're shelling, which is a fertilizer that Pennius is looking into to use in these very rocky soils to help build up the soil components. So, I mean, they've got a lot of good partnerships going on right now and some really good business the way that it's working. So it was exciting to see how much things are changing and how hopeful it is.
Really lots of good skills and content of knowledge and information that's being transferred throughout all this training that's been given to these VSLAs. So just tremendous. And all this in the last 5 years as well.
Yeah.
So let's just talk a little bit about the transformation of lives.
This was like a huge theme, which we picked up on, maybe because it's one of our values here at the river, but it was the local people who kept saying, we are in this because we are seeing lives transformed. The facilitators said over and over, I do this work for free because we are seeing transformation in our villages. And they don't know that that's our value, so they weren't plugging it so we keep supporting the programs. They're just actually seeing this deep transformation on the ground. It was a beautiful thing to see. So when we were with the villages, we would ask them, okay, so give us some examples. Tell us how things are changing. This village, one of the women said, I could buy dishes, which is a very humbling thing for us to hear, right? That's how her life transformed. She could buy dishes. But in some of the other villages, they said things like, I bought clippers and now I have a barber shop. I was able to pay my kids' school fees 2 years in a row so they don't have to miss school.
Some of the women talked about the fact that they now have a new house. They could afford to build a new house. The bricks are made locally, but just you need all the materials, you need all the time and the effort, and so just the fact that they could build a new house that housed their children, their whole family, is a wonderful thing.
And one gentleman said he was able to buy a cow, which is a huge amount of money there. So it's a massive testimony.
And I think the biggest transformation that we kept hearing was the harmony within the household, the harmony amongst the village, just how well they were interacting with each other and how their lives had been transformed in that regard. And I think inside of that was hope. You know, hope is, and the reaching out towards hope is in transforming in itself. So. Yeah. Wonderful times, wonderful stories that we heard. This next slide just shows the cattle business. Melissa just mentioned that one guy bought a cow. It's big business. It's huge to get into cattle farming. And so just even to start with one is a great start. And so our prayer is that he's able to kind of continue and then to grow and to get another one and then to start his own herd in that way. So
Zambia is very similar to Alberta. Like we could argue with them about whose beef is better. It's Zam beef everywhere, and that's like you see cattle everywhere, and they brag about their beef, and I'm like, nah, our beef is better. They're like, no, it's not, ours is better. So it's a real thing. So to be able to break into that business at that like grassroots level is pretty huge.
It's very huge. So we'd like to just turn this time for a few minutes over to you. We've been sharing a fair amount of the history and the partners and then what happened on the ground. Are there any questions that you have that we might be able to provide answers for? Or?
Many of the questions posed were not recorded, so I will relay them to the best of my ability here in order for you to better understand the answers. First question. You mentioned that there is more demand for the Village Savings program. So do people ever exit the program and allow spots for different people? Or how does the program expand its capacity to meet those needs?
All right, so you're asking about the composition and how does it grow? Or what are our other capacities of growth? I'll turn it to you.
We did hear on an individual village level that sometimes people drop out, mostly because they don't meet their obligations, so they're almost kind of kicked out, because if they don't deposit the equal amount of everybody else or something like that, then they can't continue in the group. And so then new members would come on. We did meet some groups that grew so large that they needed to split into two because it just became unmanageable to have 50 members in one VSLA, so they would split into 2 or 3 different groups so that more members can join in those villages. But beyond the 130 groups that we have right now, it's strictly a capacity problem because Benjamin can't manage all of those groups, right? Because he can't get out to more than 130 villages. It's just not possible. So part of it is funding capacity, right? We have committed as a church to give them $15,000 US every year. Last year we need to give them more because we were at risk of dropping some of those groups from support if we send more money, so we had to send an extra $5,000 halfway through the year. So that'll be a discussion going forward of if we're sending enough, because I mean we're seeing such great transformation, we don't want to risk losing anybody off the program. but it is strictly a capacity problem. So any of the villages around the area where there's VSLAs hear about it, and they're asking for them on their own, but without the proper things like the lockbox doesn't work, because you're trusting somebody with all this cash that they can get into very easily, right? And it's a huge temptation if you're starving, right, to have that money. So it's a capacity issue on our part right now.
So I was just wondering how we're involved in making change, because if they're the ones volunteering and they have to make their own money to receive money, are we paying for the training of the staff or our partners, or where is that money going?
Yeah, so as a church, what we support is the staff that we introduce. None of those staff members are volunteer. Those are all paid positions. We don't pay for all of their positions. Obviously, World Renew has their own staffing that lends support to our program. But we provide money for trainings, and Benjamin, we have supported his position since he came on. So we pay for at least half of his salary is what we do. And Penny is new, and we're not funding him at all. They actually received a grant for 1 year, and it's renewable up to 3 years for him to come on. So the volunteers are the level below Benjamin. There's a facilitator from each congregation, which we'll get to a little bit in more detail when we talk about the structure of the board. But there's a local facilitator who's usually a farmer, somebody of a high status in the village, who volunteers to do this training and oversee it within their congregation.
I was wondering if or how we're supporting any schools. Are the school-age children going, or?
So Zambia has changed in the last 5 years, where now school is free, so there's no school fees, which is wonderful on the surface, but it's created this problem where the government can't afford to pay for more teachers. So you have classrooms with 80 kids in the classroom, which is not a sustainable model, right? So you have kids in there with 79 other kids. Are they really learning anything? Right? So universal education, sure, but it's not reality quite yet. They're still working through that. They also changed it so that grades 1 to 3 are now taught in the local language, and then it switches to instruction in English starting in grade 4, which is really good for building that literacy and numeracy in these kids who come to school not understanding English yet. But hard on the teachers, because the teachers get placed anywhere in the country, so they might be teaching in a language that's not their local language. So there's some things that need to be worked out there.
The question was, are they facing any persecution? No, Zambia is very much a Christian country and very held high value, the Word of God and Christian values, so there's no persecution in that sense.
But we did, just to add to this, make a point of asking each congregation, or like each VSLA, if it was only RCZ members in the group, and they said no, it's open to anybody in the village. So we have people who are Catholic, we have people who are Anglican, people who are from the United Church Baptist. So they're letting it, like which is what we wanted. We didn't want it to just be an RCZ program, right? Because that just is creating some sort of disparity. So it's a very open, love your neighbor kind of program, which is great.
Yeah, if it was just RCZ, it would also create walls.
Yes.
Right? So we don't need those walls. Cool. Any other questions?
So Jared's question is it a fully cash society? In town, you can use debit, and that's like we could. But when you're talking about these local village people, it's fully cash. Because for them to be able to get into town to access a bank would probably cost all the money they had to put in the bank anyways. So that's part of the beauty of the VSLAs, is then their money is held in their village, so they don't have to travel to access it.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on to the talk a little bit about the Madzamoyo board.
So this was after church on Sunday when Dale finished preaching after the 3.5-hour church service that Rev Zulu cut short. Because each choir wanted to sing 2 songs, and he was like, no, this is enough, 1 each, and then we're done. So in this group, there's like the staff members that we introduced and our team and a few of the local bishops. The gentleman on the far end is the chairman of the board right now in Madzamoyo. So that's Jairus. Was his last name Puri? I'll just say it is. I don't think it is. It's Monza. And then in front with the sunglasses on is Pastor Lungu?
Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So he also has an honorary position on the board to help oversee it. And he takes care of the Madzamoyo Training Center. So anybody who's traveled with us before, we often stayed at the training center. He's now in charge of that. So the way that the board is comprised is that there's basically 10 large congregations in the Madzamoyo area that belong to RCZ. So each of those 10 congregations then selects people from within the church to join the board. They're elected to join the board, and those people essentially become the facilitators at the village level. So it's a 4-year term. They have to commit to being in that role for 4 years, doing the facilitating and the training and all of that, and that's how the board is structured right now.
Cool. Let's just give you a little view of this Madzimoyo compound, where the retreat center is, the conference center and all that. So if we play the video, I'll give you a little bit of a running commentary on the left. We saw the reception. There's some dormitories right over there. This round structure is where the caretaker sleeps and lives. That's also another dormitory. This is the dining hall. The white building is the dining hall. And the cookhouse is there underneath that shed roof right there. There's a gathering of people. I have no idea who they are. But they're just a clear space over there. And then a little further off to the right, turn the corner, there's the conference center, which is where we met. And we're back at the reception center, where they also have some dormitories on either end. So that just kind of gives you a view of the whole compound. Tried to stand in the middle of that to give you a view of that. So, what happens there on that compound? What goes on with the board, and what are their activities? We're about to share that.
Yeah, so for anybody who's been around for a while, has seen the oil press, right? Smelled the oil press, heard the oil press. We sponsored the oil press 13 years ago, probably, and it is still running, which is very exciting. And so they're using it to press oil from sunflowers and...
I think it was just sunflower.
Is it just sunflower? Anyway, so people bring their crops in, and then the board charges a fee to press it into oil. And if they do seed loans, then any of the seed that's repaid to them, they press and they sell the oil in the market to raise a profit. So.
All right, so 50 kgs produced 12 to 14 liters, if you didn't hear that. I think it was quite distinct when we ate some of the foods. You could really tell that they were using a sunflower oil, and so they were selling that 27 kwaches, they said, $2 Canadian for 1 liter. If they're making 14 liters, you do the math. Yeah, sounds like it's pretty good business.
The next slide is of the shed. This is where the local board used to meet. We would often have meetings with them here as well, and there's a bit of a storage shed for seed and that sort of thing. Right now it is being used as a dormitory because there are so many students at the high school. There's not room for them in the dorm, so it's full of kids. So that's some rental income.
Speaking of rental income, there's a rental house, which the river supported. It was a project that was supported. I think I heard that Nathan was there helping to build a little bit while
Ed, Quentin,
Ed.
A whole bunch of people were there helping build it, yeah.
So this is fully operational and has been constantly rented out, so it's a good source of income for the board. And then they're building
another house because the rental house was such a great source of income, and all it needs is flooring and windows, except for needs flooring and windows, and right now it has their poultry business inside it, so whoever that lucky teacher is going to have some feathers in there when they start renting, but they're using what they have, so.
All right, so that's kind of an overview of what the board does. The board raises money so that they can then afford to bring people in, the board members to travel in, because some travel from quite a distance. So they might hire a motorcycle or a taxi to retrieve them and bring them into town, pays for some other meals and so on and so forth. So there are some expenses that they incur that they then become self-sustaining, and they're not reliant on charity to keep that board going.
And some training. The reason the house isn't finished is because they decided to take the money and do a training class together instead of finishing the house. So I think that's great forward thinking on their part.
Yep. Cool. Anything more on the board?
Oh, probably it'll come to me later.
Okay. All right, let's just share a little bit about our partnership reflections, questions that we might have. What would you like to tell us as you reflected back on this trip, back on this whole partnership? What first comes to your mind?
Well, the first thing is what I put on the slide, which we've talked about a little bit already, but On the left, you can see it says 2017, and this is when we were there. We were bean counting, asking the villages what was most important to them. And so that's what we did that whole trip, was a survey basically with them to identify their priorities. And this is the same congregation. So you can see in this picture the men and women are separated, right, as we're doing this work. And the same congregation is the one that then told us it was hard to do the gender training and all of that, but now they're intermingled and they're harmonious, and they're talking about how their lives have transformed. So being able to actually see that when I went back in my pictures and see how this one specific congregation has changed was huge. I've been going for so long, right? I was on the 2007 scouting trip. There have been so many changes that are hard to articulate, even just with the schooling, like we talked about with Rob, and with underage marriage being discouraged now, and fewer kids being born and families. Like, there's been so many changes, but they're hard to quantify and hard to really share, come back and share with a group of people who maybe haven't been there before. But to be able to put this up and say, this is the exact same congregation and this is the change in the last 5 years, I find very inspiring.
Yeah, this was my first trip there, so as I think about it, we had the opportunity to meet up with Alphonsius, who was one of our first bridgers.
In 2010, he was our bridger, yeah.
In 2010. So we met up with him. He's now working for World Vision, but we met up with him and his family. And I had been asking questions of the group as to, I'd like to know more of the context of Zambia. I want to know more of the context of Madzimoyo and all that. And just so you know, I'm going to be asking questions like that. And so Alphonsius made a comment as we were meeting with him. He says, "Oh, Zambia is such a beautiful country." And I thought, I'm just going to probe that a little bit. I said, "So what makes you say that Zambia is a beautiful country?" And his response was people. He talked about the people. He talked about how beautiful they were, how gracious they were, how at peace they were. He started to give us a history lesson on the country of Zambia, saying they have never had a civil war. In fact, they are a resource to other countries around them. They're kind of like the Sweden in all of Africa. They're just a beautiful people. And that was really impressed upon me as I continued to journey throughout the villages and so on, and just to see that, how true that was. One of the questions that came up that was asked again and again is like, are partner trips necessary? It's a hard question to ask. Should we have just sent money instead of actually sending people? And so we even asked them. And apparently this question has been asked again and again.
Multiple times. We want to make sure we're good stewards of our resources and doing the right thing for the people. And the response every time is, yes, you need to come. You need to be here. You need to promote the relationship. You need to see what's going on. Mm-hmm. It's always a resounding yes. So
yeah. Mm-hmm. So I was quite pleased to hear that from them as well. I suppose we could have just offered, hey, we'll just give you some money. They said, no, we want you to come. They want that partnership. One of the things that really impressed me while I was there was, you talked about the fact that it was a Christian country, but their dedication to the Word was enviable. How much they loved the Word and dived into it and opened it. As I was preaching, I'd mention a different verse, and suddenly you see more pens come out and notepads and Bibles and so on, and they're taking notes. And just the meetings themselves, the village savings and loans meetings, always started with a word from God, and then a little bit of training and some topic that came out of that word from God, and just how dedicated they were to the Lord's words to them, to inform them, to instruct them, and I would say even to transform them. So it was quite enviable, I thought, on my part. Through that, I had a translator while I was preaching in the Madzimoyo congregation, and it was Reverend James Luongo. I thanked everybody, sharing the pulpit, giving me space. I thanked Reverend Luongo because then I did, and I said, "You're going to make me sound good." But just a good connection with him. He asked me for if we could share contact information along with another pastor in the trip. And so I look forward to ongoing interactions with these pastors over the next little while and to discover how we might be able to connect and continue this partnership. I did ask outright it was Lemon who responded to the question of how can we engage more in this partnership? And Lemon said, the youth. Our youth can talk with your youth. Your youth can have an impact on our people, and our people could, probably share good things with your people, with your youth. And so kind of like pen pals of old, WhatsApp is used widely out there. And so if any of the youth, I saw some of them with phones, they would have access to that. And so maybe that's something that we can look at down the road, is connections that might happen that way. But I do think we are planning for next year to go, January. Are we thinking January?
It'll probably be about the same time, emerald season.
Emerald season.
Let's get rained out.
We had rain a lot of days that we were in Madzamoyo, either in late evening or early afternoon, but it's beautiful time. But I do think that we're going to put the plug out there right now. If this is something that is perhaps stirring within your heart, we would invite you to lean into that in prayer and ask, well, what can I do to prepare to go for next year? And we would invite you to come along. And we're looking for this gender diversity.
Yes, I was going to
hold to it.
I want everybody to be able to come, but we're going to have to, not always be a team of women going.
Yeah, it was good. Any other comments about the partnership?
Just thank you for your support for the last 15 years. It is tremendous, the amount of people whose lives have actually changed by something that, we can give money here and barely think about it. But these are people's lives changing forever for good, and they are so grateful. So they asked us to bring back thanks, so here it is. Thank you.
If you think that there's 130 village savings and loans, and each one has an average of 8 to 15, who's good on math? Let's say it was, who's good on math? How many is that? What's the range? 130 people times 8 or 130 times 15? Just, well, that's 1,300 people. Yes, 10. So I think that's just even of itself. We know that there are 1,300 people whose lives have been impacted through this partnership and the efforts that they have been putting on the ground there.
Well, 1,300 households, right?
Right.
Which could be
1,300 households. Very good.
5 people in each house. So already it's exponential. Yeah.
6,500. Did I do the math right? All right. When we were at the board, we met with the board, the Madzamoyo board, on the last day, and they asked me to make some closing remarks. And so I asked them to turn to Philippians 1, verses 3 to 6. And I invited them to view these verses as a communal prayer, as a communal thanksgiving, because we are saying this about them, but we are asking them to say these verses about us as well. And so it says, we thank God every time we remember you. So that's our challenge, that every time we think of Madzamoyo, we thank God every time we remember them. In all of our prayers for all of them, we always pray with joy. Joy. I hope you got a sense of the celebration that we encountered as we did when we were there. Because of their partnership in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this, and this is, I think, is really key, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Jesus Christ. That all the good work that is happening there in Madzamoyo will continue on and bring it to completion. This is our prayer for them as it is their prayer for us. And then I actually closed with this prayer. So if you would, please join me in this prayer. Shall we pray? Heavenly Father, this is our prayer, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and in depth of sight within the people in Madzamoyo and here at the river, so that we may be able to discern what is best, and may be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, to the glory and praise of God, we pray. Amen.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this recording. Just a reminder that you can find our website at rivercommunity.ca. There you can find our events calendar with information about upcoming messages and gatherings, or sign up for currents. Feel free to send us a message on Facebook. We'd love to hear from you. Our services start 10 o'clock Sunday mornings, and you are welcome to come early for coffee, tea, and bagels. Have a great week. Bye-bye.